Hey movers, shakers, and the stuck but curious. I'm Freya Gordon, and this is Good Shift, the podcast that helps you figure out what's next in your career and make a move with confidence. What happens when the life you've worked so hard to build stops working for you? Manoj Dias had the six-figure job, the big title, and the social life to match. On paper, things looked great, but under the surface, he was burnt out, anxious, and disconnected from who he really was. He was working hard, partying hard, and holding together an identity that no longer felt like it fit. Then, one day at work, he had a panic attack, and everything changed. What followed was a slow, painful rebuild, first through yoga, then meditation, and then teaching, and eventually creating the kind of space that he wished existed. A Space, one of Australia's first modern meditation studios. Today, he's one of the world's most sought-after voices in wellbeing, mindfulness and self-inquiry, working with everyone from the NBA and Coachella to Google, Nike and the United Nations. Manoj is currently the co-founder of Open, a modern mindfulness studio based in Venice, LA, as well as with its own app for at-home use. And I have been to the Venice studio many times, and I can really vouch for it being one of the best places to open yourself to mindfulness and also just go and move your body with the yoga classes, the power classes. So anyone wanting to explore that sort of world, if you're not in Venice, jump online and try the app. It is absolutely fantastic. So this conversation is about taking a pause, reassessing where you are and why you're there, and finding the persistence to build something that feels true. In this episode, Manoj and I unpack what burnout really feels like and why most people miss the signs, why we stay stuck even when something needs to change, the emotional and financial risk of starting again, and how to rebuild your career from the inside out. If you feel stuck in a job that doesn't feel aligned with who you are or where you want to be, or you've wondered whether it's too late to pivot, this one's for you. Manoj, I'm so excited to dive into your extremely inspiring story of change and persistence. Welcome to Good Shift.
Thanks for having me. It was a very dramatic storytelling there. I love it. Thank you.
Well, I mean, when I was putting this together, it was actually quite hard because you haven't been through one simple shift. You've been through a lot of amazing and different chapters of your life. So it's not linear, which is why I'm really excited to dive into it with you.
Absolutely.
But that was a quick way to really summarize it. So let's start in that moment where the life that you'd worked so hard to build stopped working. What did that misalignment feel like day to day?
Yeah, I think it was something that built over time for me. I kind of fell into marketing and advertising. Started off working at a bank. Again, I didn't know what I wanted to do in college, so I did a commerce degree and then just started working at a bank. And pretty early on in my career, I was wrecked with this question of, is this my life? I remember going into work every day, 9 to 5. I wasn't happy at my work. Actually, the happiest I was that very first job, which was a call center job. And it was I was working in personal lending or some shit like that. And the most fun I had was with the people I was with. And, we were all young and, we'd go Friday night drinks. And that became like the highlight of my work day because the job itself was really boring. And I was questioning for about 10 years, like, oh, is this my life? Is this my life? Is this my life? And ironically, the more successful that I became in that career in finance and marketing, the more this question became louder and louder. And it wasn't until much later on, maybe the last few years of that career, that I started to feel like I was burnt out, I was stressed, I was anxious. And back then, we didn't really have language for those things like we do now. Like no one even spoke about mental health, especially if you are a young man growing up in Australia. That kind of thing was looked down upon. People thought there was something wrong with you, like you were a freak. So I didn't really have anyone I could speak to about that. I didn't really have ways of coping apart from trying to work out more or drink more, which I did on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then you'd back it up again, the following weekend. So this feeling kind of persisted with me for a long time, and I just didn't really have the language for it. So it felt like an everyday struggle.
And What were the early signs that something was off before you got to the point where you had the panic attack at work? Did you feel like, because you said you didn't really have the language to describe it, did you feel like you knew that this was something that was mounting up and peaking to that, or was that like a surprise to you?
Oh, the panic attack was a complete surprise. Again, like I didn't know what anxiety or panic attacks were. I didn't know anyone that had any of those things. I'd never really felt it. I think back then I just thought there was something wrong with me. I'm like, my mind is just like, there's something wrong with me. And work started to become more challenging because I wasn't sleeping as well. And then the stress just kept on piling up. And I tried everything to fix it at that point. I'd go and see psychologists, I'd see doctors, I think I tried Reiki or something like that back then, which was completely new age. So I was looking at ways to try and fix what I thought was wrong. And what I thought was wrong was me. I thought my mind, there's something wrong with me and I need to fix this. So all the different things that I tried just weren't working. And then when I had the panic attack, the way it began was one morning at work. I had a coffee and I just thought it was a really strong coffee.
We've all had that feeling.
Right. I was just like, my heart was just beating out of my chest. My palms were sweating. And then I'm like, oh shit, like, did she put in like 5 shots or something like that in that coffee? And then I kind of spiraled from there where, my mind just started spiraling and I couldn't focus. I couldn't see properly. My hand was shaking. And that was when I knew something was kind of wrong, because I had like 5 or 6 support staff at that point and they were looking at me like, are you okay? And I'm like, I couldn't breathe. And I just like picked up my bag and just walked out of the office, and I was walking around the CBD of Melbourne just hyperventilating at that point. And again, this thought gripped my mind. I'm like, oh shit, I think I'm going to die. Like, this is how I end. This is the way. But at the time it was unexpected, but very, very scary.
Yeah, I imagine even just hearing you tell that story gives me a tight chest. It's very stressful. You said that you kept thinking that it was you. There was something wrong with me, so you're going to see all these people. With hindsight now, what do you think was the problem?
Yeah, I think there's a philosophical way of looking at it, and then there's probably the pathological way of looking at it. I think, philosophically, I don't think there was anything wrong with me and anything wrong with people that have anxiety. I think there's causes and conditions and there's environmental factors that sometimes give rise to that. And there are things like, not getting enough sleep and, having too much coffee and all of that. But yeah, looking back, I now have the language and can see the signs of what was happening until it happened. I would tell people that come and see me, as at Open, so many people come with anxiety and depression, and often the questions they say to me is like, how do I get rid of this, or how do I fix it? Or like, what's wrong with me? And the reality is there's nothing wrong with you. Like, these are just causes and conditions, environmental things. And in the course of our life, we are all going to be anxious at one point about something. We're all going to be sad or scared. And for some people, they're a little more sensitive and they don't know how to regulate themselves. And these things happen.
Thank you for explaining that. So now we've sort of prefaced what got you to make your big shift. Like, a lot of people, they make a shift because they get to a point where they're really bored or they hate their job. But obviously yours was sort of caused for you by a situation that you found yourself in. So let's zoom out a bit and we'll go back to where this all started. You started in the branch banking out of uni. I believe that you partially did that because you were supporting a child at the time.
Yeah, I've got it.
And then you ended up in the marketing and insurance world. So can you take us through that chapter from the start?
Yeah, so fell into banking. It was a call center, it wasn't a branch. It was a humbling experience, but again, it was a fun experience. We were all fresh out of uni and just having fun, drinking a lot and partying a lot. And then I learned very quickly, like, my mind is much more creative than it is analytical. And so I wanted to pivot towards marketing and advertising within the banking industry and work my way through that. And then there was a period of about 3 or 4 years where I really climbed that corporate ladder. And at one point I was one of the youngest marketing managers in our company, and by all intents and purposes was doing quite well. I had a high 6-figure salary. I had a team. My parents were proud of me. All my friends were kind of doing the same thing. They were very successful. But internally, I was pretty unhappy. And again, that question never left me. Like, is this what I'm supposed to be doing? And almost every day, I would wake up with that thought, go to sleep with that thought. Every day felt like a struggle. And then when I had the panic attack, it was so intense that I remember going to the doctor and saying, "I think I'm going to die." And he's like, "You're not going to die, but this is what
words.
Yeah, this is what you're experiencing." And he actually said he thought I had depression. And internally, I'm like, that doesn't make any sense, because the thoughts I'm having aren't depressive thoughts. I'm just I'm feeling this feeling of being anxious and overwhelmed and panicky. So then I went to a different psychologist, and he said I had a generalized anxiety disorder, and he also offered to put me on medication. And again, there was something inside of me that's like, this doesn't make sense. I don't feel like they're pointing at the right thing to me. And then I went to a psychoanalyst or something like that, and they were like, "Well, I think you might have ADHD, but let's test it." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, cool. Like, finally we can do a test as opposed to someone's anecdotal opinion." Went through the test, and they're like, "Yeah, you're presenting as this." And I'm like, I didn't feel 100% it was accurate, but I'm like, okay, like I can't keep rejecting everyone that's telling me this. And so I took the medication, and it felt like it worked for a little while, but then it didn't really work. And then when I had the panic attack, I was out of work for about 12 months. I lost a ton of weight. I developed an eating disorder. My mother was taking care of me for a period of time. I had savings, so I was living off my savings. And I was progressively, from a health perspective, getting worse and worse, until one day a friend came to my house, and he's like, "You just come and try yoga. It might be good, for you to de-stress, and might be good for your mind." And I'm like, I don't want to do that. And he's like, "There's lots of cute girls there." And I'm like, "All right, I'll come."
Good draw card.
It was a good draw card, yeah. And at that point, I was willing to try anything, because I had tried almost everything. And he took me to this class where it was like 8 people. They were all over the age of 60. It was the front room of a converted milk bar, which my teacher lived in. And again, I wasn't very... I don't think I was believing in anything that wasn't factual back then. I always had a spiritual side to me, but it wasn't fully integrated into my life. But there was this moment when he walked into the classroom that I looked at him, and I had this thought that I'd met him before, and it was the kind of first woo-woo experience that I think I had. I'm like, "Oh, he seems really familiar." Anyway, in that class, I just felt like I was coming home to something. I'm like, "Oh, these things feel really familiar." And he kept on saying, "You are not your thoughts. This suffering isn't who you are, and just observe your mind." And as he was saying all of these things, it was like it was piercing my heart, because I was noticing my thoughts for maybe what felt like the first time. I was observing this quality of suffering that I was experiencing. I'm like, "Oh, maybe I'm not these things. Maybe I just experienced them." And by the end of that class, I felt like something had shifted. I went home, and I'd slept for the first time in what felt like 10 months.
Wow. Came
back the next day, and I ended up studying with him every day for 8 years. I would very rarely miss a class with him. I went on retreats with him. I lived with him for a period of time. I took care of his garden. I cooked for him. And then it never felt like a conscious decision. I was just, going there because I felt well. After, I think it was about 18 months, I went back to work, and again at a really high salary. But at that point, he had asked me, "Why don't you just come in and sit in on classes?" And so I would sit in and just take notes about how he was teaching. And around the same period, I had met a girl and she was going into her yoga teacher training. And I wanted to impress her. So I'm like, all right, I'll come and do it with you. And the studio had offered me a job as soon as I graduated. And I never thought about teaching because I'm like, I can't, like, it's not cool to be a yoga teacher back then. I knew they didn't get paid well. And all my friends were, CEOs of big companies. There were VPs at, Price Waterhouse. They were doing all these incredible things. And I just thought it was really embarrassing. So I went back and I started working as a marketing director again. But just for fun, I thought I'd go and I'd teach one class. And I taught one class, and that became two, and that became three. And those classes started to fill up. And I started to just really come alive when I was teaching these classes. And there was this feeling that I can't really explain, but it felt like I don't have to pretend when I'm in that classroom. I can just be myself. And working in the corporate world and working at my job, I felt like I was pretending. I was pretending that I cared about the product. Credit cards, I didn't. I was pretending that I cared about making all this money when the reality was it wasn't making me happy. I had to play the politics of corporate life, and I fucking hated that. And then I went into the classroom and I was just teaching something that I knew inherently deep in my body could really change someone's life for the better. That was kind of the early ember of me starting to teach.
I love how you got there, because it sounds like, just dialing right back to the start, when you went into the call centre, that wasn't a conscious decision as much as, what did you study at uni?
Commerce and marketing.
And is that the natural next step you would have taken anyway after uni, or was that just you sort of needing a job and that being a good option to go into?
Yeah, it was just like I just needed a job, basically.
Yeah.
And the job market was pretty tough back then.
Yeah, and then it sounds like you managed to get into that cycle, which is, I think, what happens to a lot of us once you start doing something and you're starting to get good at it and you're starting to move up and then you start to get a better salary. It's actually really hard to break out of it. So do you feel like, what are the reasons that you feel like you got stuck in that cycle?
I mean, I think safety, security, and comfort are the main ones. I think growing up in a place like Australia, I never felt like I could dream big. I never saw what I see now, which is like everyone can be an entrepreneur, everyone can start their own business. And besides that, everyone can have 4 different businesses at the same time, and you're not pigeonholed to be this one thing. Whereas for me at that period of time, it was one thing. The generation before me would have jobs for the rest of their life. You go into the bank and then that was it. You'd get a gold watch when you were 50 or something like that. And I think when I was coming through, that's what I felt as well. Like, you go in this one path and sure, you might switch companies, but you stay in that field. And I look back at my LinkedIn actually, and I'm like, oh, some of the people I work with have stayed in that company and it's been like 10, 15 years now and all that. But for me, I always felt like I was only on one path, and that's why that comfort felt good.
Yeah, and I mean, some people might be happy staying in what they've started out doing, which is great. But for the people who aren't feeling that way, but they feel like they can't change, because I do think, while you said that we've got to a point in time where a lot of people realise I can be an entrepreneur, I don't have to be, born out of a golden egg or something like that. What would you say to people who feel like they can't make a change because they're on a path and they have safety, security, comfort?
Yeah, I think in retrospect, like you mentioned, I've done a lot of risky things in my career and in my personal life, for what it's worth. I think the laws of nature really tell us change is inevitable, and everything is changing, even if we like to acknowledge it or not. Our feelings change, our financial situations, our health, and the world changes. It really is a matter of what you're willing to risk to make that change. And I don't begrudge people that have stayed in the same job, because that's amazing. It's great. And there's a certain level of beauty and comfort and ease and equanimity in doing something that, that makes you content, that can enable you to enjoy a life outside of work. But for me, at that time, again, it wasn't a conscious thing. When I came back, I never thought I was going to be a teacher and become that full time, but I was just so unhappy it consumed me. And I thought, well, I can stay and be consumed by this question of, is there more for me in this world, in this life? Or I can just take the risk and fail quickly and then come back. And yeah, maybe I am meant to be an investment banker or some shit like that. And that was my path. But I couldn't live with the question of what if. And that became louder and louder. And more so, I'm a Libran, so I overanalyze every big decision in my life. The decision ultimately to leave the comfort of my job didn't feel like a hard decision because my body was just saying, yes, just do it. It felt very natural and comfortable. So it didn't feel like a huge risk. It did to everyone else around me. But for me at that point, it just felt very natural that this was something I just had to follow.
Can you tell us a bit more about that shift moment when you said, okay, I am stopping with my current career and I'm going to move into teaching? and tell us about leaving your job as well, because I think a lot of people struggle with that actual part of the resignation and things. It sounded like, you weren't too worried about that bit, but talk us through it a little bit.
I think I was probably delusional, to be completely honest with you. I remember first telling my dad, and my dad's like, "You're doing what?" And he's a very successful businessman, and he's like, "Have you thought this through?" And I'm like, "Yeah, like I'm just happier." And I wasn't even telling him, "Yeah, there's a career here, there's an opportunity. The wellness industry is small, but I think it's growing." It's like, I just think I'm going to be happier here. And he's just like, "You have lost your mind." And he was, I think at the start he was disappointed. He's like, "I can't believe you're giving up this job." But I felt better, and I think they started to see the change in me. When I started meditating and doing yoga, they saw me change as a person. And so, yes, they were disappointed with the shift in work, but I think there was something inside of them. They were like, well, maybe this is what he needs. I remember telling my daughter's mom, and she just kind of laughed at me. I remember telling my friends, and they're like, okay, let's just see how it goes. And truthfully, I didn't think it through. I didn't think that I was going to make enough money to live the way I was living. I was living a very lavish lifestyle. So I quit my job. And even my boss at the time was like, "You're going to leave this marketing director of this department to teach yoga?" I'm like, yeah. And I think they all thought I was crazy. So, I mean, that happened. And
did that hold you back at all or make you start to doubt yourself when they were putting all these thoughts in your head, or were you feeling quite confident and secure on your path?
I'm pretty stubborn. So when I make my mind up, it's pretty hard to...
Yeah, so maybe that almost drove you forward a little bit.
Yeah. No, I was just like, I don't care what they think. I'm just going to do this.
Yeah.
And I didn't think it through. So I mentor young kids these days, and I tell them, think it through. Because when I left, I was on like 160, 70K. I was mid-20s, which was a lot of money back then.
Yeah.
And when I started teaching, I was getting like $65 a class or something like that. And I was teaching 3 classes. So I moved back home with my parents, and I quickly picked up as many classes as I could from different studios. And for anyone that's taught, any sort of class experience, what it's like schlepping around from one studio to another. I just taught a whole lot. But the interesting thing is with that shift, I was someone that, I love clothes, I love fancy dinners, I love spending money with my friends. When I started teaching, none of those things started to matter to me. And I think I realized I was filling a hole inside of me with those things. I was unhappy with myself. I was unhappy in my career. I felt an emptiness. And I thought these other things would make me happy. And when I started teaching, I was just so fulfilled with practicing and teaching and learning that I didn't want those things anymore. And so, ironically, I became happier and happier, earning less money, spending less on things, living a very simple lifestyle, and that fulfilled me for many years.
Can you talk to us a little bit more about your mindset between that trade-off? Because I think that's something a lot of people struggle with, especially when you're in the corporate world and you're earning a lot of money so you can live that lavish lifestyle. And I know when you said you made the transition, it started to actually not be so meaningful to you, all those other things that you were going to have less of. With that, I think you'd said that you were making like a 30K salary in like your first few years, which is a huge leap from where you were at. But for people who are at the stage that haven't yet found that feeling that they're like, no, I don't actually need all of these things, but they're wanting to make a shift and they're trying to rationalize, like, how would I do that if I had to take a bit of a pay cut? And, you know, most people's probably wouldn't be as large as yours. Like a lot of people would find that middle ground. But how would you advise them to start thinking about all of those things that they might be losing, I guess?
Yeah, I think it comes back to the individual. And if I look back now, I never saw becoming a teacher as a career move. I didn't get into it for the money because I knew from the start there was no money there. I think I was just desperate to feel alive again. And so what I would encourage people to think about is, would you do this even if you weren't going to get paid? You know, would you do this even if you knew you might fail? Would you do this even if it meant having to sacrifice what you're doing? And if the answer is yes, then do it, because that just shows that it's more than a career for you. It means something more. And I think when you get into your zone of genius, which is what that really is, you're willing to take on all the risk because it feels like it's more of a risk to not do those things. And that's what it felt for me. I'm like, it's more of a risk for me to not dive in and do all these things. And look, the one thing is, when I switched careers and I got into this, the yoga, meditation, wellness world was not what it is today. Now it's a $1 trillion industry. Back then it was maybe...
Worked out well for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a bit of luck, you know, and this is what people maybe don't want to admit. Like there's always a bit of luck and fortune. And I got into it at a time when there weren't many men that were teaching yoga in Melbourne. I was one of the few, and you know, that was a thing. I also was, from the beginning, more meditation based than yoga. So like when I was teaching or started teaching, no one really was doing that outside a few very select Buddhist meditation centers. So there's a bit of timing, there's a bit of luck that's involved in this. But for people that are thinking about this shift, I would think of, okay, would I do this even if I wasn't going to get paid? Because that will really build your why you're doing this. Then think of what your present circumstances are. If you're in your late 30s and you have kids and you have a mortgage, you have to think a lot harder than I did, not having many of those things. I had a child, but thankfully parents and had a great partner that were able to help me in that situation. And all these other things, are they important to me? Like, is the clothes that I wear, the car that I drive, the house that I live in so important to me that I'm not willing to give that up? And if it's true, then that's great. Like, factor all of those things in. And then I encourage people to take baby steps. Dip your toe in like I did, like do part-time teaching and see how that works. Because I find, and I'll bring it back to the example of yoga, meditation, breath work, fitness, Pilates, people tend to be lit up after they do a training and they'll dive in. They're like, this is my life. I love it so much. And they'll find after a year or two that it's really hard to survive on a teacher's salary unless you're willing to compromise on a lot of things. And then I think 70 or 80% of the people that I know eventually go back into some form of full-time work. So, factor all those things in, dip your toe, play around with it, and then see where it takes you. And ultimately, it's a leap of faith, and you have to acknowledge that as well.
Yeah, I love that advice, and that's something that comes up a lot, dipping your toe in, and you can always do things on the side. We've got more than 8 hours in our day, and lots of people are working like 12-hour days and things,
right.
But there's always time to be dipping in and trying to find what lights you up.
Yeah.
And I think a big part of your story as well, as you said at the end, it's a leap of faith, is bravery, right? Especially what you were going into, you said there was an opportunity actually because you were one of the only men in the meditation space, wasn't super flooded, but I actually think that makes you really brave, because stepping into something where there wasn't a whole lot of people doing it and a path forged for you is even more courageous. So what sort of role do you think bravery takes in it? And do you have anything to say to people who they want to make a leap or they want to do something, but they're just feeling a bit worried or a bit small?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, again, like a philosophical response to that is with age, I realize that life really is short. And sometimes these questions can really plague you. I remember speaking to old entrepreneurs and just older people in general who had these burning desires that they never really were able to act on and fulfill, whether it came to asking a girl out or whether it came to starting a company or following their dream. And I think it's a real shame that we're so scared of failure. I get why, because sometimes it's like homelessness or having a comfortable life. But I think if you really believe in yourself, and if you really believe in the human spirit, we're much more resilient than we think we are. Like our ancestors have overcome so many things. So for me, I was always prepared to fail. And if you can embrace failure as not the final destination, but perhaps a stage on your journey, then you're willing to risk it all. And for me, I was willing to risk it all because I knew that I was meant for more than what I was doing. And I believed in myself a lot. And that doesn't mean I wasn't, gripped with self-doubt and imposter syndrome, because I was and I am still in many ways. But I believed that the practice was worthy of more people experiencing it, because I had seen how my life had transformed. I'd seen how my health, I'd seen how my relationships had changed from this very simple thing we'd call mindfulness. And that became more important than the money I made. So whenever I'm going through hard times, whenever like business doesn't seem to be going well, or I'm doubtful of who I am in the world, I come back to the product or the practice, which I know has the power to change people. And I've always just had that belief in that, and I feel like if I can believe in this thing, then everything will kind of follow.
I love that. And while we're on the topic of talking about meditation a little bit, for someone that has never dipped their toe in meditation and is a little bit interested, but feels maybe a bit intimidated by someone that goes and sits for hours a day in silence and things like that, where would you recommend that they could start?
I mean, firstly, I just think, and I'm not just saying this because I work in the industry. If you want to learn about yourself, if you want to learn about your mind, I think it's imperative that you sit down and you observe it. And when you observe your mind, you see very clearly the things you're afraid of. You see very clearly the things that light you up. You see very clearly the stories that you hold. And this helps in your career, because we are all running on stories that we've been telling ourselves or we've been exposed to by our culture, our parents, our environment. So that really helps make these shifts. And, because I knew that everything is impermanent, because I knew that I had a groundedness through my practice, I knew that I could survive in this new business. So I was fortunate enough, again, by accident, to find this incredible teacher back before there were apps and things like that. But now, 15, 16 years later, there are so many meditation apps. So if you're curious, you can start with YouTube if you don't want to pay for an app, or you could start with an app, or you can go to a class. I would recommend finding a teacher that teaches real meditation. Mm-hmm. And by real, I mean meditations that have been proven over time to be efficient and effective. Mindfulness being the one that I teach and the one that I've learned. Open, not to plug my own company, is a great place to begin, because we create a bridge between people that have never meditated to becoming meditators through breathwork, movement, and yoga. Or you could just go and find a class wherever you are. There's so many places now that are teaching meditation.
Yeah, I like that. And I like what you said about finding someone who does real meditation, and mindfulness is a great place for people to start. I guess there's so many different types out there, so I think that can intimidate people a little bit. And from my own experience, I have found that going to an in-person class was really valuable, because sometimes if you're trying to do it at home on an app or YouTube and you have no experience with it, you can just want to get up and leave and walk around after 3 minutes. And it's quite nice to have that feeling of everyone going through the same thing with you, especially if it's a teacher who you really resonate with, then
Right.
it can actually become an amazing experience that you want to pursue.
Yeah.
It's like one of those things, if you do it the first time and it doesn't go well, then you're not so likely to jump back and do it again. So
Yeah.
it can kind of be a good thing to
And you have a
start
lot of
right.
questions. You're like,
Exactly,
am I
yeah.
doing it right? Is this right? Is that wrong? So it's nice to have someone you can ask questions of.
And I love that we've brought that into this conversation, because I do think a big part of finding what you want to do next and not really knowing is about sitting still and just taking some time to think. So being able to have a practice like that, obviously it is about not acknowledging the thoughts that come through, but just learning to be still so that you can take that time to find what may be next.
Yeah, I think it's really important to pay attention to our bodies, and mindfulness helps with that, because sometimes it's hard for us to discern between intuition and a fear. I have all these great business ideas, and at times I'm like, oh, is that coming from a place of intuition, or is it like an intuitive, or is it like an anxious thought? And I think being able to discern from that is really what mindfulness helps with. It gives us clarity to the point where you get to this space where it just feels like a hell yes in your whole body. And then that's a point for me where I trust, whether it's now relationships or business ideas or work or friendships. I need to really feel in my body that this is the right thing, versus analyzing in my mind in real time if this is what I should or should not be doing.
And is that feeling a feeling that you can describe, or is it just something that you know is a feeling for you?
I think it's now a point where 80% of it is just something you can't describe. You just know.
Yeah.
It's like, when someone asks you to describe love, you can't, but you know what it feels like when you experience it, right? But if you pull it apart, it's like, oh, was it lust, this, that? But in the moment, you feel like you know. And so nothing's ever certain. Mm-hmm. No decision, whether it's to leave your job, start a company, is ever a certain thing. It's only in retrospect when you can look back and be like, oh yeah, that was a great decision. And, I was having this conversation with someone else, and they're like, oh, you're so brave. You chose this. And I'm like, yeah, but at the time I thought I was crazy, and everyone around me thought I was crazy. And it's only now, like 15 years later, I look back, I'm like, wow, it was brave. And like, wow, it was kind of intuitive. But at the time you don't know. And for anyone listening to this, I also encourage you to not judge your journey until much later on in life, because you might start here, you might end up somewhere else. And that's a beautiful part of the journey. And your first step might not be the end destination. It might not be the end goal. It might lead you to something completely different.
I feel so lucky to be talking to people like you on this podcast, because it makes me feel so inspired. Every time I'm hearing things like this, it just makes me want to go out there and do things. Can you talk us through the moment when you opened A Space and a bit around that, and then how that transitioned to open?
Yeah. So again, this was another dumb decision. Let me go right back. I was teaching yoga now for about I want to say about 8 years. Meditation, again, was my thing, but I was teaching yoga because that was what people were into back then. It was helping me make the money. One day, a friend of mine was part of this thing called the Entrepreneurs Organization, where people that were making in excess of 5 million or 10 million a year would have these little clubs where they would mentor each other. And he was a very successful entrepreneur. He's like, hey, I think my group would love to hear about meditation. Why don't you come and just talk to them about your journey, and maybe they could pick up some things, because they're all stressed and shit like that. I'm like, cool. So I told him the journey around. I was dumb. I left this high-paying marketing job, and now I do this. I don't make much money, but I'm calmer and happier. And I think I was very confident in explaining that. And so after that talk, about 6 of them reached out. They're like, hey, could you come and train our staff on meditation and do this? And it was almost instantaneously, I'm like, wow, okay, if there are 6 people, 6 companies that want me to come, maybe there's more people. And I put together a makeshift company, and I started to wish for a co-founder, because I knew where my strengths and weaknesses were. And within a week, I'd met this other really cool guy through a friend of a friend, and he was also creative, but he was much more interested in business. And he loved this idea. And over the course of one day, we spoke for 8 hours around this idea of launching a business. And so we launched this company called A Space. I started doing B2B meditation trainings and talks. And then we started to do on the consumer side these workshops where we just invite all these friends. And so over a period of time, maybe about a year, these workshops we were running were attracting more and more people. And it was all young people, which was really different at the time because everyone that was interested in meditation were going to the Buddhist schools, or they were doing at-home Vedic meditation trainings. But no one was really packaging this ancient practice in a way where people thought it was cool to do. And they saw these two young guys doing it. And so it started to grow more and more and more. And at the time, New York City was where the modern meditation movement was really going off. There were a lot of studios out here that were doing mass meditations. And I came out here with my co-founder and I went to some of them. And these are teachers I had looked up to for 10, 15 years. And I'm like, wow, I wish I could be like these teachers. And I came and I remember practicing in one of the really cool studios back then. And the teacher was obviously incredible, but I thought, I think we could do this studio thing a little better in Australia. I don't know, like it felt very sterile. It felt very impersonal. And it just felt like, oh, I feel like we could do this. So I came home and I remember telling my co-founder, Josh, I'm like, let's open a studio. And he's like, dude, we're not even breaking even right now. Like, how can you no, we have to do it. We have to do it. And like I said, like when I have an idea, I'm really stubborn. So I kept on saying, let's do it. And he's like, from where are we going to get the money? And I said,
Valid question.
Yeah. Next question. Where are we going to get the money? I'm like, well, I can ask my dad for a little loan. I can take out a credit card. And he's like, cool, I'll do the same. I'll take out a credit card. So we slapped together maybe 20, 30,000. And we found we found the closet of a psychology studio. And it was a big in the sense it was maybe like 100 square feet, maybe more, maybe 300 square feet, I want to say. Around 300 square feet. And we convinced the practice to let us take it over. We would renovate it, remodel it. It'd be great for them as a business because they would see meditation in the space and it would be a win-win. And we decided to launch the studio. And we pulled in all the favors we could. We got architects that were friends of ours. We got designers that Josh had dated. We got plants from a neighbor. And we made this beautiful space. And we launched, which was at the time Australia's first multidisciplinary drop-in meditation studio.
That's cool.
Yeah, and we were both creative, so it was beautiful. The marketing was well. And it blew up at that point. And that was the start of the studio. The studio did well, but again, anyone that has a brick and mortar space, you know that it's not a profitable business. And it wasn't a profitable business. It was just this really cool brand. And, 2 years in to the business, or maybe 3 years in, my co-founder left because it was just hard. We weren't making money. We were all doing odd jobs to try and make it survive. But again, maybe the third dumbest decision I had, I said, okay, I'll keep the business. I'll take on all the debt and I'll try and make this work. We went to the National Gallery of Victoria, which was a huge space, and we started doing mass meditation experiences. So 400 or 500 people. And again, people in America were like, holy shit, like these guys are doing cool stuff. They were seeing it, brands were seeing it, but only I knew we weren't making any money on this thing. And then COVID happened and everything shut down. And I did the only thing I thought we could do, which was at the time we shut down all the spaces that we were doing and we took it online. And by online, I mean Instagram. And this is when, I don't know if you remember this, when COVID happened, everyone was doing all they could on Instagram, right? People were doing cooking shows. Everyone was a yoga teacher, was a meditation teacher. And so what I did was I contacted every meditation teacher I knew, which, all around the world at this point. And we put together this program called the School of Deep Feelings, which was every day a free meditation experience from from these teachers all around the world. And then that kind of blew up and gave us a lot more press and awareness. And that was when, at that point, I connected with a bunch of different companies in the US that wanted to work with me. But a really important aspect of this story was I started dating my now wife in 2018. And I knew at some point A-Space wasn't going to exist how it was. And I was either going to close it down or I was going to make it into something else. And I think I knew that, after this COVID thing died down, I was going to close it and I was going to move it to New York to be with her. So I remember telling her in 2020, I'll be back in a month. February 2020, I was with her. And I came back, and then that's when the world came down, and then I didn't know what was happening. So for 9 months, I was in the process of getting my visa to move to the US, not knowing what was going to happen with the company. I was writing my first book, and then that's by a very strange set of circumstances, I met my partners at Open, and the rest is kind of history. But we ended up talking about me initially consulting with them, helping them set up the business, the brand, the teaching, recruiting. And then after 3 months, they were like, you're doing what you're doing in Australia. We're doing what we're doing in San Francisco. Why don't we just do it together? And I said, all right, let's do it together. So I became a co-founder at Open. It was pretty much like an acqui-hire. They acquired A-Space and the community and all the IP. And then I moved to San Francisco and eventually LA.
Amazing. You make the story sound like it's just sort of moved very smoothly, but obviously we know that that's not the case. So I'd love to hear, how did you overcome all of those challenges that you came across? There were so many times when you were struggling to make ends meet, and it sounded like you said that you were doing some odd jobs on the side, so you went back and you got some other jobs, and it also sounds like that's sort of how you met the Open people, because you were maybe going out to just get another side job as well as something that's in your area. So can you talk us through how you came through those challenges, how you made sure that you moved forward still? I guess without, some people feel there's a shame going back to get other jobs when they're starting their own thing.
Yeah, I wasn't doing too many other jobs here and there. But I think it comes back to, for me, I really just believed in the practice. I really believed that, I saw my friends going through anxiety and depression. Some even went, having suicidal thoughts and doing all of that. And I kept on trying to convince them, come and learn meditation, come and learn how to love yourself, or come and learn how to quieten the noise in your mind. And everything out there in the market, people were like, no, it had such a bad reputation, right? It's like, oh, it's what hippies do and all that, especially in Australia. So I really thought that I could save lives, and stupid of me back then. I'm like, I could save lives doing this shit. So I really believed in it because it had saved my life at a certain point. And so we went through periods where we weren't eating. My co-founder and I slept at our studio at some points. We would have one meal a day. It was kind of crazy and brazen back then. But I really, in my heart, just knew we had something really special. I looked at what's out there. I'm like, there's no one doing it like what we're doing. And there probably was, but I just couldn't see it with rose-colored glasses. So I just kept on coming back to this belief that this could touch someone. And if it just helped 100 people, then amazing. My job is done. I feel happy. And I feel like I've contributed to humanity in some way, as opposed to taking something. And so, there have been so many different things. I went through insane relationship breakups because of the fact that I wasn't making any money, and I probably wasn't a great prospect to these women. My parents were constantly concerned because I was always trying to borrow money from them. At one point, they're like, we're not going to give you any more money. You got to figure this out. My friends probably were sick of me coming out and not spending anything on drinks and food. So it shaped who I am now, but it had to burn who I was. It had to really remove the person that I was in order for me to become the person that I am now, because I couldn't do what I was doing and survive. I had to change. But I always came back to the practice. I'm like, I feel like this is going to help me, and it just helped me feel more sane. So I just, foolishly or not, I just stuck with it.
It's amazing that you've been able to take what is your purpose and like really feel that the whole way through. I think that is something that is sort of the North Star of what people would want to do. But, you know, as you say, when you go through it, it didn't necessarily, you felt your purpose there, but it didn't necessarily feel like a smooth road.
Yeah. Can I just add something to that?
Please.
I think that is maybe the one thing when I talk to all of my other founder friends that has really stuck with them through their transitions is that they really embody and believe in their product. And turns out my product is meditation. But I really believed in that to the point that I was willing to do it even if I wasn't going to get paid. And I did it multiple times, you know, for different brands because I thought it was exposure and this and that. And my advice to young people that are trying to do this or trying to switch careers is don't get into it for the money. Like, think really hard about that because money is such a state of flux. It comes and goes and trends come and go. But if you're willing to do this thing and not get paid and you're willing to do it and for you to die on that Roman Empire, which is this new career, then do it, because I genuinely believe that you have to have that kind of belief to really be successful in this next shift of your life.
What would you say, looking back at where you were before and looking to now, how your definition of success and fulfillment has changed over time?
I mean, I don't think it's materially changed. I think I believe I have to be internally happy with myself. I have to be healthy. I believed, and I still do, that money doesn't really make you happy, that, you know, fancy things don't really make you happy. I still get caught in those things. You know, I'm still like, oh, maybe I do want those shoes, or maybe I do want that. But I think I'm fortunate that my meditation practice humbles me over and over again to make me see that happiness really isn't an inside job. Nothing external will give me that. Even the job that I do, even being a teacher, quote unquote, won't make me happy if I'm miserable inside. So I temper that always because I get a lot of opportunities to do different things, but I come back to what lights me up the most. And what lights me up the most is when I'm sharing something that's 2,500 years old that I can see is having an effect on someone's life. And so if I lose everything, knock on wood, I never do. But if I do, I'll always come back to just teaching, and I know I'll be happy.
Amazing. So we'll just wrap up with a few quick questions. Is there a particular resource that might be a book, a podcast, anything like that you would recommend to people who are going through a shift period in their lives or want some inspiration around mindset?
I mean, there's probably so much, but I go back to ancient wisdom at moments like this. A lot of Buddhist books talk to us about change and impermanence and identity, because those three aspects are really strong when it comes to wanting to change who we are or change careers. So there's a book on Zen by Suzuki Roshi. I think it's The Art of Zen or something like that.
I can drop it in the show notes, so we'll get the right name.
that was a really pivotal book. Joseph Goldstein's book on mindfulness is also important. Thoughts Without a Thinker by a psychologist called Mark Epstein. All of these talk about impermanence, identity, change. And I think for me, having that understanding of things are going to change really helped me through my business decisions and career.
Yeah, I think it's so easy for us to feel like everything needs to just be the same on, same again, and that's what security and safety is. That's what makes us feel good. But change is exciting. Change can be really tough, but I think it's something that we all need to get a bit more comfortable with. Yeah,
and I think ultimately, the question itself, I don't think anyone has the same path. People won't have the same path as me. Like I said, there were so many different factors, causes and conditions and luck and fortune that went into it. Be very careful about following other people. Learn what didn't work for people. I find in my career, when I look at people that I'm inspired by, I learn more from what didn't work for them than listening to the 10 things that they think they should follow. Because, there's a lot of shit out there, and you just want to make sure it's true for you. And ultimately, if you believe in what you're doing, and if you have a good relationship with your intuition and your body and your intellect, then that is what you should follow, not what someone did.
And Manoj, where can we find more about you, more about Open? Just for everyone listening, there is so much more to his story, but we could not dive into it all in the 1 hour podcast. So if you want to learn more, there are more resources out there. But where can we find you and Open?
Open is O-P-E-N. It's like it's our website. It's a really weird spelling, but makes sense, I think, at some level. The Instagram page is the same. My Instagram is Manoj Dias _. I've also, like in the last 6 months, started writing a lot more after I wrote my book in 2020. So a lot of my insights on business and career and personal stuff I've been putting out there for free. So you can read that Substack.
And what's your book called?
The book is called Still Together.
Amazing. Okay. Well, everyone can go and look those resources up. Thank you so much for this deeply insightful chat. It has been really great to get your perspective on what was a really monumental shift. You've made a lot of changes, and I'm so thrilled that it's all working out for now. Obviously, there's always change going forward, but it's been so good to chat. So thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.